rushing to have a bunch of people following you, a bunch of people buying your product, a bunch of people that you're trying to influence. There's no point in rushing that, because what you're gonna learn is the power of impact. You'll be able to get more insight as you move forward. My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're gonna talk about Chainz, who you may never have heard of, but he's a very popular rapper. He's had multi-platinum albums, he's had a wonderful career. He also started off very, very small, as in a local talent down in Atlanta. He actually changed his name once or twice. He's had a long journey. He's about my age, so he's approaching midlife, and he's been in the business as a rapper and as a creator and as a business person for about 2.5 decades. So we have a lot of parallels here. The insight from Chainz is priceless. In fact, as I said in my original column that I did for Inc. magazine, you can check it out at damonbrown.com. This is something that Seth Godin would say. So if you think of Seth Godin and you think of Chainz, you might not combine them together. I saw it though, I saw an interview with him. I think this is so brilliant. And what it's about is about creating something that will last with your business career and about serving people. If you want more insight like this, be sure to subscribe. And also check out the playlist. There's 3 or 4 playlists that are pretty popular, and you'll get more insight in regards to that. So this is what Chainz said in a fabulous interview. For my longest, my goal was to get a fan a day. And sometimes it was that I was one song away because I was recording every single day. As an entertainer, you're always one thing away. I always knew that I was. You were always one thing away. He was focused on one fan a day. This is back when he was presumably broke. This is when he was selling CDs literally out of the trunk. I'm guessing down in Atlanta, which is where he's from. This is when he was recording every single day. Think about it. He might not have had a record contract. He might have been not sure how he was gonna pay his bills, but he was recording every single day, that commitment. There's lots of videos I've done on this channel about that. Again, you can subscribe to check those out. So we won't get into that part. What I want to focus on is the one fan a day. Number one, it's all about the minimal viable audience. As I talked about in a recent video about getting press and why you don't really need it for whatever service you're trying to do, the minimal viable audience idea comes from Seth Godin. He is the founder of Akimbo and recently stepped away to do his own business to let it go independent. You can learn more about him at akimbo.com. He's a brilliant marketer and he's an excellent teacher. And he talks about creating the minimal viable audience. Now, the minimal viable audience means you creating something and engaging with the smallest people possible. Not short, but the smallest audience. If you're creating an app, which I've done a couple in the past, I ended up selling the last one that I did. If you're writing a book, if you're creating music, if you're, now that we're starting to get out of sheltering in place, if you're having concerts and you're engaging with the audience, with your singing or your guitars or whatever, your slam poetry, don't worry about crowding everyone in and getting, Wembley Stadium in there. Focus more on the individuals. If you do that, there's a few big benefits that come from it. Number one, you're able to figure out what kind of impact your art, your creation is having on the audience. Once you get to a certain scale, you don't know. I remember my first major book came out. It was about the history of sexuality in video games called Porn and Pong. You can look it up. Came out about 13, 14 years ago. Other books of mine that came out, but that was my first. That was like my baby. I remember going down to New Orleans, which is where I used to live, but it was after I moved from there. Went down with my girlfriend, now wife. We ended up having a book signing in my old neighborhood, or right outside of my old neighborhood in the Farborough Marigny. If you're down there, you know where that is. And 3 people came. Literally 3 people. So we had other business in New Orleans, but I flew all the way down. I think I was in California at the time. Flew all the way from California to New Orleans to have a book signing for my first major book. 3 people came. One of them might have been my wife. I can't remember, but it was definitely 3 people, right? And I gave my all. And it was great. Fast forward years later, I'm doing keynotes, and I had one last year, I had 1,000 people in the crowd, but I knew how to talk to them. I talked to them as individuals. I talked to them not as this lump sum of 1,000 people. I knew what kind of impact my work made on them. In fact, that's part of what made me a keynoter a few times last year, is I knew how to talk to them individually. That's what Chainz is talking about. That's what Seth Godin is talking about. That's what I'm talking about. You're creating for one. There's not going to be 10 million people reading this book at the same time. I look forward to that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be you and me. You reading this book and me inside of it. Literally. That's it. So at the end of the day, when I've had my bestsellers, and I've had a few, or I've had my modest hits, or I've had ones that were goose eggs, and I've had some books that flopped, it still ends up being the same process. That's what Chainz is talking about. At the end of the day, it's always going to be a fan a day. Your influence is always going to be one-on-one, no matter what you create. I'm cool with, friends with, have talked to at a distance from some of the best-selling authors within the space that I talk about, with thought leadership, entrepreneurship, business. I don't even have to name them. We all are doing the same thing. I know them. We have coffee together. We have a drink together. We have lunch together. I've seen them speak and then, giving them props after their keynotes. We're all doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing I was doing in New Orleans more than a dozen years ago when I was talking to 3 people. They're talking to 3,000. Some of them are talking to 30,000. We're all having the same experience. And so you rushing to have a bunch of people following you, a bunch of people buying your product, a bunch of people that you're trying to influence, there's no point in rushing that, because what you're going to learn is the power of impact. You'll be able to get more insight as you move forward. One of the challenges too, if you're going for the big audiences, which Chainz knew really early, is that if your stuff is for everybody, that means it's for nobody. We find this a lot in the coaching space. We find this a lot in the creative space, particularly with writing, where if you're writing a book and someone says, who's your book for? This book? This is for people who are trying to make impact, who have limited resources, over-mentored and underappreciated, who aren't sure, they know what kind of impact they want to make, but they're not sure if they can actually make the impact. So they need to create a framework to build with that, to build from now. And they're not exactly sure how to do it. This is going to give them the framework for it. They have a passion about something. I'm going to help them build from now based on the resources they have, no matter where they are in the world. That sure as hell isn't everybody. But there's so many times when we'll create something and you might ask, well, who's it for? Well, it's for everybody. No, hell no. Pardon my French, not going to happen. Because when you make something for everybody, it becomes mush. It becomes the lowest common denominator, as we used to say about TV back in the day, right? You're creating something for everybody, it's mush. But that's what happens when you're thinking about hundreds of thousands of people and you're not thinking about one individual. You're not thinking about me as an individual when you create something. That's what Chainz, that's what he understood. That's why he has a success and continues to have success. Again, we're on parallel tracks. And so I know that journey. Our journeys aren't that much different. He's been in the business for a while. This is why he's still in the business. He's still thinking of one fan at a time. The second thing, which I touched on, is that you learn how to scale. If you're working with one fan a day, ironically enough, you learn how to scale. Again, back to my startup Cuddler. We had a handful of beta users, which means early users, before something launches or when things are just starting to launch. They call it a soft launch nowadays. We had beta users all summer of that 2014 before we launched the app in fall of 2014. We're talking with them. Again, I was a COO and I was a CMO. So I looked at myself as like the head of community. So I'm talking to them every day. We're figuring out the bug reports. I'm sending the bug reports to my 2 other founders. One was an artist, one was a programmer, and the programmer was the CEO. And so getting as much feedback as possible. We ended up launching September 18th of 2014. Within a week, we had 100,000 users and 10,000 completed connections. In other words, 10,000 people had experience on our app. We had only been out for about 7 days. 100,000 people had downloaded it and used it. Those are incredible numbers, even to this day. If we hadn't done that work with that 2 dozen or so beta testers that we had literally all around the world, because we were an international group. I was in the US, my partner was in the UK, and then our other partner was in Canada. If we didn't have all these beta testers internationally working on our stuff, then we wouldn't have been ready to scale. Imagine all the bug issues. Imagine all the community issues, all the stuff that would have popped up. Like, it gives me a headache years later, even thinking about if we just did it. But instead, we focus again on one fan at a time, one fan a day. Because we did that, when 10,000 fans came in, when 100,000 fans came in, when 250,000 fans came in, we were ready. We were fine. It was hard, but we were absolutely ready because we were able to scale. Sometimes we have these big picture ideas. We want to have the bestseller. We want to have the #1 app in the world. We want to have all the riches. And we're afraid to scale back because we think we're going to lose the vision. It's actually quite the opposite. If you focus on the now, you focus on the next best step, as Oprah would say, focusing on the next best step. That gives you the foundation, the insight, the grit to be ready for the next stage. If I didn't have my flop books early in my career, and I have a handful that did goose eggs, if I didn't have book signings where literally no one came, I was sitting there talking with the bookseller for an hour, about my career and learning about their career because no one showed up to my book signings. So then when 5 people came to the book signings, I had appreciation. When 1,000 people came to a book signing or came to see me speak, my appreciation is through the roof. But I remember a dozen plus years ago, nobody was coming to see my stuff. And back to 2 Chainz, I saw and appreciated that fan a day. If you don't appreciate that fan a day, that one fan that you got that will buy anything that you got, is ready to be served by you, if you don't appreciate that one person, you're not ready for the 10,000. You're not ready for the bestseller. You're not ready for the platinum hit. You're not ready. So you need to appreciate the fans first. Then, if it's meant to be, things will build on there. If you want more insight, be sure and check out my popular playlist called Smart Creative Habits and Routines. It's free. It's about a dozen or so videos that's very similar to this, about 12, 15 minutes long. And it's from insight from Beyonce, from Oprah, from Mark Cuban, a lot of insightful people that I respect, and breaking it down, and just like I am now, and give you the best insight possible. And be sure to subscribe if you're liking the content. It's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30 a.m. Vegas time. Make sure you don't miss anything. So be sure and subscribe, as well as set the bell so that you can get a notification on your phone or on your email when a new video and episode is available. And throw something in the comments. Let me know if this is insightful for you. Anyway, until next time, remember you can always bring your worth, and you can always build for now. Take care.